Okay, so we're going to continue our journey with Paul. Last week we talked about his, kind of focused on the early part of his journey, where he was Saul. And we talked a lot about the concept of conversion and, that process by which he comes to understand what God has in store for him. And how sometimes that can be very surprising, very counterintuitive, but also very ordinary, right? And how a lot of us sometimes get knocked on the ground by God, and we think, that it's that old colloquialism you always hear. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. Right? So today we're going to really focus in on Paul, and I'm going to let Barron do a little bit of his work, getting into the concept of Paul, but then I'm going to get right into looking at Paul from the perspective of probably two of his epistles or letters. And I think it's important to understand that when we read the epistles of Paul, we have to understand what kind of writing we're reading. We're reading letters. We're reading letters or correspondence to the Christian communities that he was involved in founding and nurturing and maintaining. So these letters have, like all letters, have a very specific purpose. They're focused, oftentimes, what we have are his letters to these communities. What we don't have are the letters that were sent to him that basically he was corresponding back to, which would have been nice, because then we could have seen some of the issues. But we kind of know what some of these issues are. And when you study some of these books like Corinthians and Galatians, you'll see that a lot of the things that people struggle with individually in their faith journey to Christ, as well as things we struggle with at a communal level as a church, haven't really changed in 2,000 years. And why is that? Well, despite the advent of modern science and modern technology and the growth of the world and communications and all these wonderful advances that have brought us, closer together but also further apart, right? And given us a broader view of the universe, human nature itself really has not changed, right? While our instruments and our tools and our perceptions might be a little greater, the basic premise of humanity has stayed fairly consistent, and probably will for millennia. So the same kind of issues that challenged the first Christians still challenge us today. We're just in kind of a different environment for those challenges. So a couple of things I think it's important to understand. Right after the death of Jesus and his resurrection and ascension into heaven and Pentecost, the primary core of the Christian identity was really Jewish. These were Jews who believed that Jesus Christ was the long-promised Messiah. And while he wasn't the Messiah that a lot of them expected, they saw him and understood because of his resurrection that he was the Messiah, the Son of God. And so they were processing all that and dealing with it while being fully immersed in their Jewish identity as the chosen people, the people of Israel. And as the community started to broaden out, we started to see the inclusion of Gentiles, non-Jews. But at first, a very specific type of Gentile. Because if you went to any synagogue, you had Gentiles that believed in Yahweh, the Jewish God. And they practiced and tried to maintain the Jewish laws. But they weren't Jews. So they had a certain kind of associate status, I guess would be the best way to call it, Kind of like our catechumens in RCIA, They're part of the church, but they're not part of the church, right? So those were the first Gentiles that became part of these Jewish Christian communities. Why? Because when Peter and all the disciples went out and preached in the synagogues and the temple, these Gentiles were there. And they heard this witness and they heard this preaching. And some of them even saw and witnessed Jesus Christ because they were there at the places that Jews congregated. And so for them, it was like, wow. But little by little, you started to get more Gentiles involved that hadn't previously been associated with Judaism. So they had no context of Jewish law, Jewish tradition, Jewish scriptures, right? It'd be like a pagan walking right off the street and jumping right into RCA. Bible, what's that? Okay? Jesus, who's that? Okay? Things we take for granted, right? Just like the Jews would take for granted the Talmud, the Torah, Moses, the prophets, the law, right? Yahweh. These Gentiles had no knowledge of that. Well, the only knowledge they had was of Jesus Christ, because that's what was being witnessed to them. And we'll see some of that in this Paul. So, within the first 20 years, you started to have these two kind of perspectives on Christ. The traditional Jewish perspective, represented by Peter and the 12 apostles, and the Jews who believed in the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And then you had the Hellenistic or Gentile perspective of those who didn't have any of that background, but saw Jesus Christ as the living manifestation of God, incarnate, present, but without all the underpinnings of Jewish tradition. That's really important to remember. When you study the early church, you really have to understand that dynamic, because it was a huge issue in the early church. Huge. And as we see with the life of Paul, because he was out there in the diaspora area, Asia Minor and all those areas, he was the one that was having to deal with these issues. All these Gentiles are coming into the faith in Thessalonica and Corinth and Ephesus and all these places throughout the Roman Empire who had no background as Jews, didn't see themselves as Jews, didn't practice Jewish law, didn't understand Jewish law, didn't really understand Jewish tradition. It's like, you want to do what to me? I don't think so. Okay? All right? I don't even let my wife do that to me. Sure, hell, I'm not going to let you do that to me. Okay? So, I think it's really important to understand that perspective. It's like I said, it's like a pagan coming in and trying to explain things that we take for granted, that we accept because we were raised in the Catholic culture. What's that weird lady with the white and black kind of thing going on over there? She has a ruler. What's that all about? Is she like the measurement person or what? Does she go around and measure things? Oh no, that's Sister Mary Terror. Why do they call her sister? Oh, you'll find out. Okay, that's the thing we have to realize. Those of us who are real Catholics, right? We take things for granted that converts don't always understand. And they come to see Jesus Christ from a different perspective than we do. Very similar to the early church. To the Jews, Jesus Christ was the long-awaited Messiah, spoken about by Jeremiah and Isaiah and Daniel and all these prophets. Right? He was much anticipated, much awaited, much predicted. To a pagan, especially a Greek pagan, someone raised in the Roman or Hellenized, philosophy, he's just kind of one of many. Different, pick a god, any god, So, this is the environment that Paul is operating in. And when you think about it, that's really important to understand. Why? Because Paul was like the perfect pick for this job. You see, none of the other apostles as Jews could have gone out and witnessed to the Gentiles like Paul did. Why? Because none of them were trained in the Hellenistic Greek tradition. They didn't understand the cultures. They didn't understand the language. They didn't understand the nuances of rhetoric and philosophy and debate and logic and Sophocles and Aristotle and Plato. Paul did, because he was schooled in that as a young man. Paul was bicultural. Paul was bicultural. It'd be like today being able to go in a parish that has a very strong and powerful Hispanic community, as well as a very powerful Anglo community, and being able to witness to both. Understand the languages, understand the cultures, understand the perceptions and perspectives, the idiosyncrasies, all the little nuances that make a difference on how we see Jesus Christ. And I know priests and deacons who do that very well. It's their gift. They're bicultural. And the church is stronger because of it. That's key. Paul could witness to both Gentiles with authority and Jews with authority. Why? Because he was a trained Pharisee. And not only just any trained Pharisee, but a trained Pharisee under one of the leading teachers of the day. Okay? He's not unlike one of my favorite guys, the British astrophysicist and cleric John Polkinghorne, who before he retired occupied Newton's chair at Cambridge, won a Nobel Prize in physics for his work on quarks, but is also an Anglican priest. He operates in both worlds. He can speak a theological language with a scientific understanding. It makes it all kind of come together. So this is what we're dealing with Paul. This is the beauty of Paul. But it's also Paul's greatest struggle. Because as we'll see, this difference in perspective causes a lot of dissension in the early church community. The Jewish Christians wanted the Gentile converts to become Jews. They saw that as an essential aspect of being Christian. Why? Because that's our Messiah right there. That's us. That's him. He was a Jew. He was born a Jew. He was raised a Jew. He was circumcised. Didn't eat pork. Went to synagogue. Did Shabbat. You better fall in line. Yeah, whatever, man. Okay? That sounds like a lot of hooey to me. Okay? So that's really critical because it really impacts the way the church develops. All right. The other aspect that's really important in early church history, it's huge actually, is 70 AD. The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. In fact, the destruction of Jerusalem, for all intents and purposes, by the Romans. If that hadn't happened, then Vatican City would probably be in Jerusalem, not Rome. Okay? That's how momentous that issue was to the early church. Because up until that time, the center of the church was where? Jerusalem. Why? Because Peter was there, and James was there, and John was there, and all the major leaders of the church were there. That's where it started. That's where Christ was crucified. That's where he was resurrected. Bingo, bam. And that's where it was until 70 AD. When the Romans come in and totally decimate the place. James is martyred by that time. Peter is off to Rome. And most importantly, Judaism, as it was known for thousands of years, ceases to exist. There is no more temple. There are no more Sadducees and temple priests and scribes. That's all gone forever. What you have left is what we see today. The synagogue with the rabbi, that's Pharisaical Judaism. That's what was left. And that's what Jews are today. They're Pharisaical Judaism. Okay, that's what they practice.
And that's different from the other one, because what?
Because of the temple.
Jewish?
No temple. Sadducees were about the temple. Temple priests were about the temple. No temple.
That's the structure. I mean, their beliefs on the culture.
No, that's more than the structure. That was a whole hierarchy of worship and focus. It'd be like, let me give you an example. If tomorrow the entire Vatican City blew up, was obliterated, nothing left, no pope, no curia, all gone.
We'll make them put it back.
No, that's nice, but the Romans didn't allow you to. Okay, so the Italians said, no, it's gone. We're not putting it back.
The structure of the
Oh, it changed the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. So think about it. If tomorrow the Vatican blew up and everything was gone and the Italians didn't let us rebuild it, where would the church be? Where would the focus of the church go? Right? Yeah. It would, well, no, seriously. It would literally disperse to the local ordinaries, wouldn't it? There would be no central focus to our church.
Oh, so they can come up with their own rules and stuff?
Well, over time, things get kind of, get a little murky there and kind of starting to get woo, right? Like the Protestants, right? And then this is the problem with Islam, quite frankly. There is no central authority to Islam, is there? There is no Vatican City or Jerusalem, is there? Well, there's Mecca and Medina, but that's not the headquarters of the church. There is no grand imam that runs everything like the Pope, who when he says, blowing innocent people up for the sake of Allah is wrong, stop doing it, people should listen to him. There's nothing. You got all these voices out there of all these disparate leaders saying all kinds of stuff. There's no central authority. So, who do we believe? Who do we focus on? So that's what happened in 70 AD. That went away. It was huge. Not only was the temple destroyed, but Jerusalem was vacated. They just told everybody to go. They didn't kill you, they told you to leave. And it was a diaspora. Like, phew. And it was, centuries afterwards until it really started to populate again. So that was huge. Because now, something very interesting happened after that incident. The Jews blamed the Christians for the destruction of the temple. There was a large faction of Jews that said it's these Christians that caused all the problems, caused the Romans to come down. Well, no, it wasn't really. It was all your zealots running around creating revolution and killing Romans. It finally upset them, and off they go. But what happened is the Jews who were Christian, up until this time, could go to the synagogue. Why? Because they were Jews. They were Jews. They were allowed in the synagogue. That's why Paul could, all through Paul, what does Paul do when he walks into a new town? Goes right to the synagogue. Why? Because he's a Jew.
I got a question.
Yes.
Why were the Gentiles allowed in the synagogue then, if they weren't Jews?
They weren't allowed in the synagogue. They had a special court of the Gentiles on the outside of the synagogue that you could go and stand at and listen. You had the Gentiles, the women and children, and then all the men were on the inside. So in our church, the pagans would be right out here in the courtyard, the women and children would be in the nave, and then all the men would be inside the church. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, anyway, so anyway, but I got you thinking. All right. So, but no, they weren't allowed inside the main structure. Yeah, and that actually goes way back to Moses. Actually, when he had the tent of meeting, there was this area that some of the other people who weren't Jews, who were just with the group, slaves and some other people that they'd taken out of Egypt. But it's really important to remember this construct of what happened after AD 70. Because what happened after AD 70 is the Jews wouldn't allow the Christian Jews anymore to come to the synagogue. They said, you cannot come here anymore. kicked them out of the synagogue. That was big. That was a big deal. Because that was when you had the real break between Judaism and Christianity. That's when Christianity ceased being a Jewish focused construct.
What was that date?
Around 70 AD, after the destruction of the temple. It took, a number of years, but over, probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. But what you had was, no longer could they go, you're not Jews, go away. We don't care that your mother was Jewish, and your grandmother was Jewish, and your great-great-grandmother was Jewish, and you're from the tribe of Benjamin, and you're circumcised, just go away.
So if the hierarchy was destroyed
Mm-hmm.
and everyone was dispersed,
Right.
then how did that happen throughout wherever they got dispersed at?
They
How were they
communicated
communicating?
by letters, by writing, just like Paul did. You have to remember that, we take for granted some things in this day and age that the Romans actually did quite well in the ancient world. The biggest thing about the Roman Empire was the roads. This was the first time in history that people could travel throughout the empire relatively quickly. And when I say relatively quickly, it still took days and weeks, but compared to the ancient world, that was quickly, as opposed to months and years. The Roman road system allowed travel around the empire to the different major cities of the empire relatively quickly, either by ship or by, chariot or by horse or just by walking. Because for the first time you had a network of established roads that you could easily traverse at a really rapid speed. Let me give you an example. If I did the Appalachian Trail today from Georgia to Maine, there's a trail all the way along from Georgia, Mount Springer in Georgia, all the way to Mount Katahdin in Maine. It's an established trail. It's marked, it's worn, and I can walk it, and I can probably average anywhere from 10 to 15 miles a day
That's cool, without getting lost.
without getting lost, because the trail is well marked, it's well maintained, and I just walk. I know where I'm going, I don't have to worry about it. Yes?
It's that same way in Israel today. The road networks there follow the old Roman roads
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
if you've ever seen that terrain, it's extremely rugged
Mm-hmm.
and costly to build roads, so they use
Oh, yeah.
Roman roads.
Absolutely. No different than a lot of our Highway 84, those places are all follow the old Pioneer Trail.
The Romans did those too.
No. The Mormon Romans. Anyway. But that's really key, because if you think about it, if I had to bushwhack my way from Georgia to Maine, I maybe would average a mile or two a day, if that. Okay? So for the first time in modern history, the ancient world had this sophisticated network of transportation that allowed information to travel very quickly compared to ancient times. And that was key. Yes, sir.
I was curious about Paul's citizenship. He was a Roman.
He was a Roman citizen,
And,
yes.
and I'm not sure, first of all, how did that happen? I mean,
Okay.
none of the other
Yeah.
apostles seemed
Right.
to be Roman citizens.
Right.
And secondly, did his Roman citizenship help in spreading the
Oh,
gospel?
hugely, yes. Well, it saved his life on a number of occasions,
Right.
quite frankly. And it was one of the reasons he ended up in Rome, because they were trying to kill him back in Jerusalem.
So
And he-
how did he become a citizen?
Well, he was born, Saul, was born into a Jewish diaspora family who had established itself over many years in Tarsus, which was a Roman, community in Asia Minor. And they were tent makers, they were merchants. And because he was born there in a Roman city under the Roman Empire, and his father had gained citizenship, and I don't know really how, but probably because he paid taxes and, business people and that kind of thing. He was a Roman citizen by virtue of birth. And that was huge. That was huge. That allowed him access to stuff that other people couldn't have access to, because he was a Roman citizen. So, but he gained it through his family. And that was the other reason why he had classical training as well, because his family was, most historians will tell you probably his family was middle to upper middle class as far as the socioeconomic structure of the day. And so they could afford to send their son to the, forum to get trained by the philosophers and, the classical education. And that's why he got that kind of training. It was kind of expected. If you were going to be a successful merchant operating in the Roman world, you had to understand Hellenistic philosophy and law and those kind of things. No different than if I'm going to go over and be a successful merchant in China, I better learn Mandarin or Cantonese or Hunan, and I better know the culture. So I got to go to school and learn those things. That way I can deal with people and be much more successful. Same reason Paul was sent to the classical school, because he was expected to take over the family business and be successful. So yeah, that's how he gained it. How his family gained it? Probably just because they'd been there for a long time, established themselves. Roman citizenship is no different than kind of citizenship today. It's based on, a lot of times, citizenship is based on your contribution to the community and your stability within that community. If you show yourself to be a contributing member of society by working and paying taxes and following the laws, and you provide stability by being there and showing that you're not going anywhere and not going to be unstable, chances are you're going to get citizenship. It may take a while, but that's kind of the underpinning of that whole criteria. If you're just coming here to make money and then leave, and you really never establish a home here, you really never participate in the community, then you're a guest worker. You're not a citizen. And that's the way it is for most places around the world. Okay? So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
The best I can? Yeah. But I think it's really key to understand this about Paul. And understand the environment. Because like I said, after 70 AD, the game really changed. And you really started having this separate identity formed among Christians. That while there was always this understanding of where Jesus came from, and always this understanding of the role of Israel in salvation history, it no longer became a key point of reference in our identity. There really was a break. And if you think about it, Jesus was telling people this. Jesus was telling people this. Your temple will be destroyed, and I will build it up in 3 days. The old covenant has passed away, and the new covenant is here. Okay? Jesus was trying to tell people that things were going to change. That how we understood our relationship with God was fundamentally going to change. And we had to change with it. Just like the Israelites had to change when their situation radically changed from slavery to being their own nation or tribe. And their perception had to change along with it. This was like a second Exodus that, quite frankly, we're still on. Okay? So, I'm gonna focus today on 2 specific areas of Paul. Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 13. And why am I going to do that? Because I think these 2 areas really fundamentally encapsulate the main focus of what Paul's ministry was all about. Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 13. Now, Romans 5, you're probably not as familiar with in 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13, you hear it every bloody wedding. Oh, here we go again. 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. Yeah, sure. Love is kind. Yeah, right. Give him 10 years, that'll go away. Anyway, everybody's been married a while, sits there listening, and I go, yeah, whatever. Anyways. Sounds like a bunch of honeymoon hooey to me. But,
Cynic.
huh?
You're a cynic.
Oh, well, no, I just been married 25 years. Anyway, so, but I want to focus on that because these passages really have 2 distinct but yet very intertwined things to say about how people came to understand Jesus Christ that affect the church even today. Okay? So, let's hit this one first, and then we'll kick it back in with Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians. How many of you have seen the Catholicism series? Okay. If you haven't, get it, watch it. It's great. It's really good. You can buy it online, Word on Fire, Amazon. Catholicism by Father Robert Barron. It's a presentation of 10 different episodes that really hit the basic core of the Catholic belief. And it's just amazing, all the places and sites and things that he covers. It's really, really well done. So this is part of it, that series. Okay, so you can see how Paul is operating, right? He's traveling around on his missionary journeys to all these major Roman towns and cities. And what's the first thing he does? When he gets to a town, he goes to the synagogue. Why? Because he's a Jew. That's where you find kosher food. Just saying. But he goes there and he walks in and he immediately has credibility. Why? Because he's from the temple. Ooh, he's a temple guy. Ooh. Okay. We need to listen to him. He studied with Gamaliel. Wow. He's like a celebrity. Okay. Yes, my professor was Benedict. Ooh, Deacon Bob. Ooh, we're going to listen to you. Okay. So he has cred, right? So he starts talking. And like Jesus Christ, right? They quickly figure out this guy's not exactly talking the party line.
Yeah, but I thought they kicked out those people after 70 AD.
Well, but this is before 70 AD.
Oh, okay.
Paul's martyred by 70 AD.
Okay.
So, all of a sudden, he starts talking about this guy, Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ. Okay? Now, we have to remember, at this time, those two words weren't slammed together, by the way. You wouldn't have heard Jesus Christ. You would have heard Christos Kyrios in Greek, or Jesus of Nazareth, the Messiah. Christos, the anointed one. Jesus of Nazareth is our Messiah. Whee! Wow, there's a Messiah? So all the Romans been kicked out of Jerusalem? Are we back in charge again? Hoo-yah! Let's pack. We're going back to the motherland. No, they crucified. What? Wait a minute. I thought our Messiah was supposed to come and kick some butt. Like Rambo. He's like a Jewish Rambo. What do you mean they hung him on a tree and killed him? Well, yeah, and better yet, it gets better. Hold on. Not only did the Romans kill our Messiah, but he came back from the dead. Woo! What's he smoking? Now, again, and this is what got Paul in trouble, by the way. This is the one that got him chased out of town, almost killed number of times, had to be lowered down in a basket to escape, all this kind of funny stuff. He's the Son of God. What? Wait a minute. We only have one God. And he ain't got no son. Yahweh, one God. What are you talking about? So let me get this straight. This Jesus guy from Nazareth, a dirty little small town in the backwater of Judea. He's a carpenter's son, right? Yeah, I got that. Okay. Now, he is the Messiah, right? The long-awaited promised one? Yeah. And he let the Romans kill him. Yeah. And then he rose from the dead. Yeah. And he's the Son of God, the same God who told Moses, I should have no other gods before me, because I'm a jealous God. Let's get him alive and kill him! Yeah! Right on! Right? I mean, this happens over and over again. You have to love Paul. This is one of the reasons he's my ordination saint, because Paul has got moxie. He's got moxie. I mean, let's say you're a salesman, and every time you go in to sell a product, they run you out of town and want to kill you. How long are you going to be a salesman? Not very long. Like, this is nuts, man. I got to find another job. Wait a minute, I'm a tent maker. I can make money. I'll do that. Every single time he goes into a town, he walks into the synagogue, preaches Jesus crucified, resurrected, the Son of God. Angry mob chases him, tries to kill him. He has to escape. But, there are some people, both Jews and those Gentile sympathizers, who go, somehow what he's saying is speaking to me. I don't know how and why, but it is.
I have another question.
Yes?
The Trinity then came after Christ, but was the Holy Spirit recognized prior to Christ?
Yes and no. He was not recognized as a separate nature. He was recognized as a characteristic of God, Yahweh. Yeah. So, the Holy Spirit wasn't called that. You know, the Spirit of God is God on the mountain, or God parting the waters, or the activity of God was God's Spirit. Okay, but he wasn't like the third nature of the Trinity. No, that wasn't developed yet. That comes later. Okay. That doesn't mean the components weren't there. They just weren't understood and put together in the way that they are now. Understood. But that's the key. Look at the tenacity of this guy. Look at the moxie of this guy. How many times do you got to get run out of town by an angry mob and then turn around and come back in and gather all those people that were interested and form a church? That's what happened.
But don't you think his experience with Jesus was so powerful that he could not forget that experience with Jesus? I mean,
Yes. Was it not any different than Moses after dealing with the burning bush, walking back into Egypt as an accused murderer, and walking up to Pharaoh and saying, I'm back. I was chased out of town because I was a murderer, and I want you to let my people go, which is the basic source of your economy. Right? Yeah. It's like I get fired for, let's say you're the CEO of ABC Corporation, and I get fired for some kind of misconduct. And 2 years later, I come back and I say, hey, I'm back, and by the way, I'm taking all your employees. And we're going to go. You got to let my people go. Okay? Sure. Yeah. That took moxie. See, God has an impact on us. When God tells you what to do, and you say yes, big things happen. Kind of like Mary, right? Sure, God, I'm betrothed to this Jewish guy, but let's have a baby. You'll understand. Okay? That's something that we have to understand here. Paul, that's what made him an apostle, was this commissioning, this sanctioning, this anointing by God of saying, you will go out and preach this message, and you will build my church. And he did. And that's the key right there. You look at Paul's story, and you see the tenacity that he has for mission, and you go, no ordinary human being driven by solely human nature does that kind of stuff. That's just wacko. We have this tendency, like electricity, like free electrons, to follow the path of least resistance. Right?
It's the same for all the apostles, though.
Yeah.
I've been watching the series AD, and the apostles suffered terribly.
Oh yeah, they did. All of them were martyred except for John, and John was stuck in prison in Patmos.
I had this conversation the other night about these guys had to have a tremendous source of conviction to continue in the face of that adversity. So, people who are naysayers about the resurrection, things like that, ordinary people don't have that level of conviction.
No. And I think that's the really key. For me, one of the kernels of my faith is improbability. Improbability. When you study the early church and you study Jesus and what happened, and you look at the way it happened in the environment in which it happened in, you're going, there ain't no way in hell that's going to happen in ordinary human circumstance. Not a chance. Not even a remote chance. Because we humans do not operate that on that level. Not consistently, not that broadly, no. I mean, literally, the church grew in exponential numbers in the first 200 years. And let me give you the recruiting plan, the marketing plan for being a Christian in the first 200 years. Hey, do you want to join my church? I got this dead carpenter guy from Palestine who rose from the dead. He's the Son of God. And if you join our church, guess what? The Romans can come in at any time and drag you out into the street, burn your house down, haul you to the Colosseum, put you on a big stick, and light you up like a torch. Want to join? Now think about it. That's the truth. That's the truth. Every single Christian in the first 200 years of the church had to deal with that reality. We don't even comprehend that here. They may in Africa, those Christians that were taken off on the beach and had their heads cut off, they understand that reality. But that's the reality of the first 200 years of the church. The most improbable person to be God was in fact God. And if you join his church, these are the benefits you get. Come on. You see, that's the thing. You have to understand, there was obviously something much bigger going on here that spoke to people outside of their basic human nature. I mean, if I was a successful Roman citizen, had my baking business that was in my family for generations, and I had my wife and my kids living above me in a nice apartment. I was a Roman citizen. I made good money, sent my kids to school, threw some money, gold coins at the gods once in a while. Why in the bloody hell would I go off and do something crazy that would get me killed? What motivation would I have to do that? How would that speak to my human nature? Like, if I told all of you in this room, go out and sell your house right now. Sell everything you have, tell your family and your job goodbye. We're going to Africa. And we're going to live in huts. We might be killed by Boko Haram or ISIS because we need to preach Jesus Christ. Sure, Bob. Send us a postcard. But, that's exactly what was going on in the first 200 years of the church. That's what Paul, here's a guy who comes into church like Father Spaghetti, right? And we run him out of the church. We chase him down the street. Ah! But yet you want to follow him. You want to follow him. Come back, Father Spaghetti. I know everybody's pissed off and trying to kill you, but let me join you. I want to join your thing. Come on, people. Let's reason this. Does that make sense to anybody in this room? Who does that? Who believes in that?
But they're learning the concept of life after death.
Oh, well, that's nice. Did Jesus show up in my front door and said, look, see, I'm resurrected? No, some schmuck from Tarsus comes and tells me. Who the hell are you? A tent maker. Wow, I'm sorry. You died and left you theologian in the modern world.
They would have to put a lot of trust.
Oh, yeah, they would. I'm being a little ironic here and a little humorous, but let's face it. The improbability of the fact that we're even sitting here right now in a Catholic church of 1 billion people blows my mind. It is statistically impossible in the history of the human race for this kind of thing to happen. And so, how did it happen? There's only one answer. Only one. There's something bigger going on than just us. There's a bigger thing in the universe than us. When I look in the mirror, I don't see the epitome of the universe. Thank God. So, Paul, tenacious, honoring Paul, what is he preaching? What is he witnessing to? Well, let's look at Romans 5. First thing, I think one of the important things to remember up until this time is there's a consistent theme in all spirituality up to this point in human history. All gods, all faith, all religion, all spirituality expressions have to do with a fundamental premise. Transactionalism. Transactionalism. I have to do something for my God to like me. I have to appease my God. I have to give them A, and I may, if I'm lucky, get B. Even Yahweh, I have to follow the law. I have to be a good Jew. And if I'm not, well, Yahweh. Bam. I'm done for. This is a consistent theme, even today, of a lot of spirituality. It's transactional. Right? If you're really, really good, I'll take you to Krispy Kreme and get you a donut. He's a false god. He doesn't exist. I've been betrayed by my God.
I think Bob, you committed on that one.
I know. I've done it now, haven't I? Yes, Robert.
One of the things I would say is before Jesus came along,
Mhm.
kind of shook up the world.
Right.
God was an abstraction.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And now
All God's work.
Here is God, who's a concrete, physical person.
What?
And he changes people's lives.
Oh.
Once he invades, there's really nothing you can do.
That's just damn inconvenient, isn't it? It's like when my wife finally shows up.
I mean, it puts you right on the line.
Yeah. It's like, the wife goes on vacation. Marriage is great. Wife is abstract. I can do whatever the hell I want. My wife's out there somewhere, but she's not here. Right? And all of a sudden, the wife shows up. Ooh, that's inconvenient. Now I gotta do what I'm told. Right? This is why Jesus is so scary. Because God's in the house. It's easier to believe in an abstraction. Oh yeah. So up until this time, we're dealing with the concept of God as transactional. We have to do things to gain His love. We have to do things to earn our good fortune and be in His good graces. Romans 5, verse 15. What then, says Paul, are we to sin because we are not under law but under grace? By no means. Do you not know that if you yield yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness? But thanks be to God, that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart to the standard of teaching to which you were committed. And having been set free from sin, having become slaves of righteousness, I am speaking in human terms because your natural limitations. For just as you once yielded your members to impurity and to greater and greater iniquity, so now yield your members to righteousness for sanctification. What is Paul saying there? What is he really trying to get us to understand? He's trying to get us to understand that we are not justified. Our existence is not based on transaction. Our existence is based on love. This is radical stuff. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're telling me that you don't have to do anything and I'll give you a donut anyway? I mean, you're just going to give me a donut and I don't have to do anything? I don't have to be good? I don't have to stop crying? I don't have to be quiet while Deacon Bob's talking? I'm just going to get a donut? Whoa! Wow! That just doesn't make any sense. I don't believe it. That's just not the way I've been raised. My parents taught me that I had to be good. And if I was good, then they would give me stuff. That's how I was raised. If I did my chores, I got my allowance. If I behaved, they loved me. If I mowed the lawn, I got to use the car. That's how I was raised. And you're telling me that God loves me no matter what. That just sounds like a lot of hooey to me. I don't believe it. Sounds too good to be true. Sounds way too good to be true. You're telling me that God created me out of love to be loved by Him regardless. Is that what you're telling me? And oh, by the way, no matter what I do, He still loves me. Yep. Wow. I don't know. That just sounds a little too hard. Yes, ma'am?
So how does that differ between Protestant and
It doesn't.
races?
It doesn't.
Race and-
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. They got it from us. Luther was an Augustinian priest trained by the Catholic Church in Catholic theology, and that was always preached and always believed. We are justified by grace. We have always been justified by grace. We were justified by grace from the minute Jesus Christ showed us on the cross that we were. We didn't need to have Luther tell us that. We already believed in that. When we get to 1 Corinthians 13, then we'll find out where the process of deviation is going on there. Okay? But for right now, you have no power to turn off God's love. In fact, you can't. So stop trying. We try so hard, don't we? Let's just see how I'm going to upset my mama. I'm going to get up today and I'm going to just find ways to prove to myself that my mom doesn't love me. I'm going to cry, throw a tantrum in Albertsons, and I'm going to beat up my brother, and I'm going to pee on the floor, and all kinds of good stuff. We're just going to see. We're going to test my mom to see how much she loves me. As I tell my teenager all the time, just because I love you doesn't mean I like you. Oh, I love you. Now get out. Okay. That's the key message. That's what Paul is preaching. This is a key concept of his preaching of understanding why Jesus Christ was even present in human history in the first place. The whole incarnation, the whole concept of the Messiah is you are loved. Period. Period. If you choose not to receive that love, if you choose not to understand it, if you choose not to recognize it, that is your choice. And you will make it. But you are loved. And how many times in human experience do we see this play out? How many times? How many of you have raised teenagers? No, excuse me, let me rephrase it. How many of you survived teenagers? Yeah. You make my life a living hell. Oh, excuse me, I got up this morning, got a big whiteboard in my bedroom that says, make my teenager's life a living hell. Honey, how are we going to do that today? Let's list them out. How many times did your teenager challenge the premise that you loved them? How many times did they act out in some absurdly stupid way to try to prove that you didn't love them. Yeah, you know, your mom and I just got together and had sex and brought you into the world for the hell of it. I don't know why that happened. And we've been feeding you and clothing you and sheltering you and spending gobs of money on baby crap and dolls and schools because, I don't know why, it seemed like the nice thing to do. But none of that should give you any indication that we love you. Please don't feel that way. Don't make that mistake. Right? We see this all the time, don't we? This is not unknown to us in human experience. And it comes right down to what she just said earlier. Trust. It's just the fact that I am trying to help my teenager be successful and not to suffer is just incredulous to me. Right? So that's the first message. We are justified by grace. Our existence is by love, because of love, for love. Now, we get to the tricky part. 1 Corinthians 13. Once we understand that we're loved, and we accept that love, we accept that grace, we say yes to God's grace, what do we do with it? This is the key point, where some of our Protestant brothers and sisters kind of, they don't go far enough. The best example of this is the parable of the talents. Very powerful story about grace. Did those servants deserve any of the talents they were given? Did they do anything to merit them? Did they do anything to justify the fact that they got them? No. The master trusted his talents with them. They were given to them. Here's your talent. I got the talent now. Woo! I'm justified by grace. I've got grace. God's given me this grace. I didn't do anything to deserve it, but now I have it. Now, what do I do with it? Oh. Do I just stand here and look holy? Hi, I got grace. See my grace? See? Little kids do that, don't they? See, here's my donut. You can't have it. It's my donut. But look at it. You see my donut? God gave me this donut, but you can't have it. Right? What happens with the parable of talents? We got two people out of the three that go out and do what? They multiply their talents. By doing what? By sharing. Right? And we got one who buries the talent because he doesn't trust the master. He's afraid of the master. He has fear for the master. And so when the master comes back, what happens to the two servants who multiplied their talents? Done something with what they were given? Oh, you good and faithful servant. I'll give you, you've done so well with this grace, I'm going to give you more. What happens to the servant who does nothing with his grace? Bam! Did you think I gave you that grace to sit on your butt and do nothing with it? Really? You useless, worthless piece of garbage. Off to the trash heap. 1 Corinthians 13 describes the nature of that unmerited grace. If I speak in tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For our knowledge is imperfect and our prophecy imperfect. But when the perfect comes, the imperfect will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I become an adult, I give up my childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall understand fully, even as I have been fully understood. So hope, faith, and love abide, these three. But the greatest of these is love. We are justified by grace. And our grace, if we accept it, then transforms itself into love expressed both for God and His creation. You cannot have one without the other. Both are essential qualities. Okay. Grace received has to be transmitted. Okay? You cannot say that you're justified by grace and do nothing with it. That's the message of the parable of the talents. If you are justified by grace, then you have accepted that grace and accepted the nature of that grace to transform you into someone who then moves it away from you out to everyone else in love. And the characteristics of that are exactly what Paul tells you in 1 Corinthians 13. If you have accepted God's grace that justifies you, then you are patient and you are kind. You are not jealous and you are not boastful. You are not arrogant or rude. You do not insist on your own way. You are not irritable or resentful. You do not rejoice in wrong, but you rejoice in right. You bear all things, believe all things, hope all things, and endure all things. You see, that's the key to understanding Paul. These are the two great messages of Paul. Believe in Jesus Christ as Lord, because through His resurrection, you have seen the power of God and how much God loves you. And He loves you as you. He created you to love and be loved. That's the first great message of Paul. That's what drew people in. Wait a minute. For the first time in human history, I'm hearing about a God that does not require anything from me to be loved. The second great message is when you accept that love, when you are justified by it, that grace invades you, it then transforms you. And this is what it looks like. 1 Corinthians 13. And then and only then are you really Christ. For your mission is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is the result of your justification by grace. Works are a manifestation of your acceptance of that justification. That is what we preach, that is what we teach, and that is what we believe. And Paul was one of the greatest apostles of that. He built, with the help of the other apostles and disciples, this church in the name of Jesus Christ, through the power of the Holy Spirit. And he was tenacious, and he was courageous, and he was zealous, because Jesus Christ had invaded his heart, given him the grace necessary to go out and do his mission. And that is why he's such an outstanding example of us, for us, of what it means to be church. Because to be church means to be on mission. We are all on a mission. We all struggle with being Saul, but we're all called to be Paul.